Hello everyone. Today, Biker Justice Analyst bring you a story full of humanity and compassion. Enjoy listening.
A Hell's Angel helps a stranger to start her car. Not knowing that she was his lost daughter, the windshield wipers squeaked back and forth, fighting against the heavy rain that pounded Emma's old Honda Civic. Dark clouds hung low in the evening sky, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The headlights cut through the sheets of water, illuminating the empty stretch of road that seemed to stretch forever. Emma gripped the steering wheel tighter as her car made an odd noise. "Come on, not now," she muttered, glancing at the dashboard. The engine light blinked ominously, and the car started to shudder. "Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today." Now back to the story. Her heart sank as the engine sputtered, coughing like it was on its last breath. The car lurched forward once, twice, and then began to slow despite her foot pressing harder on the gas pedal. She guided the dying vehicle to the shoulder of the road, her hands trembling slightly. "This can't be happening." Emma turned the key in the ignition, listening to the grinding sound of the starter. Nothing. She tried again and again, but each attempt only produced the same disappointing result. The engine wouldn't turn over. Rain drummed steadily on the roof as she pulled out her phone. No signal. Of course. She was miles from the nearest town, surrounded by thick forest on both sides of the road. The darkness pressed in around her car like a heavy blanket. Emma rested her forehead against the steering wheel, trying to think clearly through her rising panic. She'd always been independent, capable of handling difficult situations, but being stranded alone on a deserted road in the middle of nowhere was testing her limits. A flash of lightning illuminated the sky, followed by a loud crack of thunder that made her jump. The storm was getting worse. Large droplets pelted the windshield with increasing intensity, creating a deafening roar inside the car. She checked her phone again, holding it up towards the window, moving it around, hoping to catch even one bar of signal. Still nothing. The battery indicator showed 15%. Not exactly comforting. "Think, Emma, think," she whispered to herself, running through her options. She could wait for another car to pass by, but she hadn't seen anyone else on this road for at least 20 minutes. She could try walking, but in this weather and darkness, that seemed like an even worse idea. The rain continued its relentless assault as Emma gathered her courage. She knew she needed to at least look under the hood, even though her knowledge of cars was limited to checking the oil and filling the windshield washer fluid. Taking a deep breath, she pulled the hood release and grabbed her small umbrella from the back seat. As she stepped out of the car, the wind immediately grabbed at her clothes, and her umbrella turned inside out, rendering it useless. She tossed it aside in frustration. The rain soaked through her light jacket within seconds as she made her way to the front of the car. She wiped the water from her face, trying to see clearly through the downpour. Her hands fumbled with the hood latch, finally managing to prop it open. The sound of an approaching engine cut through the storm's chaos. Emma's heart jumped as she saw a single headlight piercing through the rain. A motorcycle emerged from the darkness, its rider a large, imposing figure in a leather jacket. The bike slowed and pulled onto the shoulder behind her car. Emma's throat tightened as the rider dismounted. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a graying beard and tattoos visible on his hands. Despite her desperation for help, fear crept into her chest as the stranger approached. The man raised his hands slightly, as if sensing her apprehension. "Looks like you could use some help," he called out over the rain, his voice surprisingly gentle despite his rough appearance. "I'm Jack. I know a thing or two about engines, if you'd let me take a look." Emma stood frozen. rainwater running down her face, caught between her need for assistance and her instinct for caution. The stranger, Jack, waited patiently, maintaining a respectful distance as she weighed her options. The rain poured down relentlessly as Jack moved closer to Emma's car, his boots splashing through puddles on the asphalt. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating his weathered face and the intricate tattoos that snaked down his forearms. Despite his intimidating appearance, there was a gentleness in his movements, like someone approaching a scared animal. "Mind if I take a look?" Jack gestured toward the engine, keeping his voice soft and steady. "Been working on engines most of my life." Emma wrapped her arms around herself, partly from the cold rain and partly from uncertainty. Her teeth chattered as she considered her options. The rational part of her mind screamed about the dangers of trusting strangers, but there was something in Jack's eyes that didn't match his rough exterior. I think it might be the battery," she said finally, her voice barely audible over the storm. Jack nodded, moving to the engine with practiced ease. "Let me check the connections first. Sometimes they get corroded, especially in weather like this." He pulled a small flashlight from his jacket pocket and leaned over the engine, his large hands moving with surprising precision. Emma watched him work, noting how he narrated each step he took, as if trying to put her at ease. "See these terminals here?" He pointed with the flashlight. "They've got some buildup on them. That can prevent a good connection." From his other pocket, he produced a multi-tool and began carefully cleaning the battery terminals. The rain continued to soak them both, but Jack seemed unbothered, focused entirely on the task at hand. His massive frame hunched over the small car's engine bay looked almost comical, but his movements were sure and deliberate. "Could you try starting it now?" he asked, stepping back from the engine. Emma slid into the driver's seat, her wet clothes sticking uncomfortably to the upholstery. She turned the key, and the engine cranked, but didn't catch. Through the windshield she could see Jack shaking his head. "One more thing to try," he called out. He disappeared to his motorcycle and returned with jumper cables. "My bike's got enough juice to get you going." Within minutes, he had the cables connected between his motorcycle and her car. "Give it another shot," he encouraged. This time when Emma turned the key, the engine roared to life. Relief flooded through her as she watched Jack disconnect the cables, carefully coiling them before returning them to his bike. She stepped out of the car, rain still falling but lighter now. I don't know how to thank you," she said, reaching for her wallet. "Please, let me give you something for your trouble." Jack held up his hands, shaking his head. "No need for that. Just glad I could help." Water dripped from his beard as he smiled, transforming his whole face into something much less intimidating. "You should be good to make it to town now, but maybe have a mechanic take a look at that battery soon." Emma nodded, still somewhat stunned by this stranger's kindness. "Thank you. Really. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped." She climbed back into her car, giving Jack one last grateful wave before pulling back onto the road. In her rearview mirror, she could see him standing in the rain, watching her taillights disappear into the darkness. Jack remained on the shoulder of the road, hands in his pockets, as Emma's car grew smaller and smaller in the distance. The encounter had lasted less than 30 minutes, but something about the young woman's grateful smile stayed with him as the sound of her engine faded into the night. The rhythmic rumble of Jack's motorcycle cut through the rain as he headed home. Streetlights cast long shadows across his path, their glow reflecting off the wet pavement. His clothes were soaked through, but the discomfort barely registered. He'd known far worse in his years on the road. The small house came into view as he turned onto Cedar Street. It wasn't much, Just a modest one-story with weathered blue paint and a small front porch. But it was his sanctuary. The motorcycle's headlight swept across the front yard as he pulled into the gravel driveway, illuminating the few tools he'd left out that morning while working on his neighbor's lawnmower. Jack killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening to the rain drum against his leather jacket. The house looked dark and empty, just as it always did when he came home. No lights in the windows, no one waiting inside, just silence and solitude, his constant companions these days. He fished his keys from his pocket and climbed the 3 creaking steps to his front porch. The old wooden boards groaned under his weight as he moved toward the door. Inside, he flipped on the lights, revealing a space that was clean but sparse. A worn leather armchair sat in one corner, facing a small TV he rarely watched. The walls were mostly bare, except for a few old photographs and a calendar from the auto parts store where he sometimes picked up work. Jack shrugged off his wet jacket and hung it on the hook by the door. Water dripped onto the welcome mat, a gift from Mrs. Henderson next door, who occasionally brought him casseroles and worried about him being alone. His boots left wet prints on the hardwood floor as he made his way to the kitchen. The house felt especially quiet tonight. Usually the solitude didn't bother him. He'd grown used to it over the years, even found comfort in it. But something about helping that young woman in the rain had stirred up old memories, feelings he'd tried to bury. He grabbed a beer from the fridge and noticed his phone on the counter where he'd left it that morning. The screen showed a missed call and a voicemail. Jack froze when he saw the name. Sarah Lawson. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up the phone. Sarah. He hadn't heard from her it had to be over 20 years now. Their brief relationship felt like another lifetime, back when he was a different man, living a different life. Jack's thumb hovered over the voicemail icon. After a moment's hesitation, he pressed play and held the phone to his ear. Jack? Sarah's voice was older but unmistakable. She sounded nervous, emotional. I know it's been a long time, and I wouldn't call if it wasn't important. There was a pause, filled with the sound of her shaky breathing. It's about Emma, our daughter. She's been looking for you, Jack. She wants to meet you, to know who her father is. I should have told you years ago, but I was scared. She's 22 now, and she deserves to know the truth. The phone nearly slipped from Jack's hand. He gripped the kitchen counter for support, his legs suddenly unsteady beneath him. Daughter. The girl from the road, Emma, was his daughter. Sarah's voice continued, thick with tears. Please, Jack, call me back. We need to talk about Emma. Jack's hands gripped the kitchen table's edge until his knuckles turned white. The beer sat untouched, condensation forming a small puddle around its base. His daughter. The young woman he'd helped on the road, with her determined eyes and that stubborn set to her jaw that reminded him so much of himself, was his child. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. Its steady rhythm matched the pounding in his chest as memories from earlier that evening flooded back. He'd been so close to her, shown her how to properly jumpstart a car, even shared a brief laugh about the weather. And he hadn't known. How could he not have known? Emma, he whispered her name, testing how it felt on his tongue. His daughter had a name now, a face, a voice. She wasn't just some distant possibility anymore. She was real. Jack. Pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping against the linoleum floor. He paced the small kitchen, running his hands through his graying beard. The tattoos on his arms, remnants of his past life, seemed to mock him now. What would she think of them? Of him? The rain continued to fall outside, creating shadows that danced across his kitchen walls. He remembered how she'd looked standing in that same rain just hours ago, Young, vulnerable, but with a strength that showed in the way she held herself. Now he understood where that strength came from. It was in his blood. In Sarah's blood. Sarah. His mind wandered to their brief time together, before everything fell apart. Before the club took over his life completely. She'd been different from the other women who hung around the Angels, quieter, with dreams of her own. He'd loved that about her. But he'd been too caught up in his own darkness to see what really mattered. Jack slumped back into his chair, feeling the weight of 22 years of absence crushing down on him. 22 years of birthdays he'd missed. First steps. First words. School plays and skinned knees and teenage heartbreaks. All gone, lost to time and his own mistakes. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the small kitchen. In that brief moment of brightness, Jack caught his reflection in the window. The leather vest, the tattoos, the hard lines etched into his face by years of rough living. He barely recognized himself sometimes, this older, quieter version of the man he used to be. But the past was still there, written all over him. The man he used to be. The thought sat heavy in his stomach as he stared out into the darkness. That man had been dangerous, unpredictable. He'd done things he wasn't proud of, things that still haunted his dreams. Was that the kind of father Emma deserved? Would she even want to know him if she knew the truth about his past? Rain streaked down the window pane, distorting the world, outside. Jack sat, motionless, watching the water create patterns in the darkness. Each drop seemed to carry a memory of the life he'd left behind, the violence, the chaos, the endless nights of wondering if he'd live to see morning. He'd worked hard to put distance between himself and that life, but it was still part of him. It always would be. The possibility of meeting Emma properly, of being her father, filled him with equal parts longing and terror. What right did he have to step into her life now, after all these years? What if his presence only brought pain, or worse, danger? The morning sun filtered through Jack's kitchen window, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. He hadn't slept much. The revelation about Emma had kept his mind racing all night, and now he found himself on his third cup of coffee, pacing between the kitchen and living room. His phone sat on the counter like a ticking bomb. Sarah's number was still there, and through her, he could reach Emma. The thought made his hands shake slightly as he poured more coffee into his mug. "What am I supposed to say?" he muttered to himself, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Hey, remember me? The scary-looking guy who helped with your car? Well, surprise, I'm your dad." He shook his head at the absurdity of it. Jack's heavy boots thudded against the floor as he walked to his small living room. Photos from his past life caught his eye. Snapshots of motorcycles and leather-clad brothers. He'd kept them as reminders of where he'd been. But now they felt like warnings. Every choice he'd made, every mistake, every dark turn, they all led to this moment. The morning dragged on. Jack checked his phone every few minutes, as if answers might magically appear on the screen. He tried watching TV, but couldn't focus on anything. Instead, he found himself standing in front of the mirror in his bathroom, studying his reflection. The tattoos on his arms told stories he wasn't proud of. His beard, now more gray than black, couldn't hide the hard years etched into his face. What would Emma see when she looked at him? A father? Or just another rough character she'd rather avoid? By noon, Jack had worn a path in his carpet from all the pacing. He'd made lists in his head, reasons to reach out, reasons to stay away. The stay-away list was longer, filled with all his past mistakes and fears. But something kept pulling him back to that rainy night, to Emma's grateful smile when he'd fixed her car. His phone felt heavy in his hand as he finally picked it up. Sarah had given him Emma's number in her message. He opened a new text message and stared at the blank screen. His thumbs hovered over the keyboard. "Just do it," he growled at himself, but the words wouldn't come. He typed out a long message explaining everything, then deleted it immediately. Too much. He tried again, this time being more casual, but that felt wrong too. 5 more attempts followed, each one erased before sending. Jack slumped onto his couch, phone still in hand. The sunlight had moved across the room, showing how much time he'd wasted second-guessing himself. He looked at the empty message field one more time and took a deep breath. Finally, he typed, "Hi, Emma. It's Jack from last night. Would you like to meet for coffee?" His thumb hovered over the send button. It felt too simple, too ordinary for something so important. But maybe that was exactly what it needed to be. Just a start, a small step toward something bigger. With a sharp exhale, he pressed send. Emma sat in her favorite corner of the Morning Brew Cafe, warming her hands around a steaming cup of vanilla latte. The cafe's familiar scents of coffee and freshly baked pastries usually brought her comfort, but today her stomach was tied in knots. Her phone lay face up on the wooden table, and she couldn't stop staring at it. The message from Jack glowed on the screen. "Hi, Emma, it's Jack from last night. Would you like to meet for coffee?" Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her phone again. The kind stranger who'd helped her in the rain now wanted to meet. Something about his timing felt strange. Too coincidental. She'd spent years searching for her father, hiring private investigators and scrolling through social media, all leading to dead ends. And now, this mysterious man appears right when she's closest to finding her dad? The cafe's bell chimed as another customer entered, making Emma jump. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and read the message again. Jack's profile picture was small but clear enough. Those tattoos, that beard, those kind eyes that had somehow put her at ease despite his intimidating appearance. "What do you think?" Emma asked her best friend Lisa, who sat across from her, dunking a chocolate chip cookie into her coffee. "I mean, he did help you with your car," Lisa said, brushing cookie crumbs from her sleeve. "And you said yourself he seemed nice, despite looking like he could bench press a truck." Emma smiled weakly. "Yeah, but meeting a stranger for coffee? After everything Mom's told me about Dad being in a motorcycle gang..." She trailed off, her mind racing with possibilities. Could Jack know something about her father? Was that why he wanted to meet? Or was she reading too much into a simple, friendly gesture? The cafe's playlist switched to a soft acoustic song, and Emma found herself tapping her fingers nervously on the table. She'd imagined meeting her father countless times, rehearsed what she'd say, practiced keeping her emotions in check. But now, faced with just meeting Jack for coffee, her nerves were getting the better of her. "You know," Lisa said gently, "you've been searching for answers for so long. Maybe this is the universe giving you a sign?" Emma took another sip of her latte, letting the warmth spread through her chest. Lisa was right. She had been searching. And something about Jack felt different. Despite his rough exterior, there had been a gentleness in the way he'd helped her, asking nothing in return. She picked up her phone again, reading the message one more time. Her heart pounded as she began typing a response. She deleted it, tried again. Deleted that too. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she wrote, "Thanks for helping me last night. Coffee would be nice. When works for you?" Her thumb hovered over the send button. The cafe's ambient noise seemed to fade away as she focused on those words. This could be nothing. Just a friendly meetup with someone who'd helped her. or it could be everything she'd been searching for. Drawing in a deep breath, Emma pressed send. The message whooshed away, and immediately her stomach did a flip. She set her phone down, picked it up again, set it down once more. "Well," Lisa said with an encouraging smile, "looks like you've got a coffee date." Emma nodded, her emotions a whirlwind of excitement and nervousness. "Yeah," she whispered, watching as those 3 dots appeared, indicating Jack was already typing a response. "I guess I do." Jack arrived at the morning brew 30 minutes early, his weathered hands wrapped around a black coffee that had long since gone cold. The cafe buzzed with mid-morning activity, the clink of spoons against ceramic, the whoosh of the espresso machine, the gentle murmur of conversation. He'd chosen a corner table where he could see the door, an old habit he couldn't shake. His leather jacket felt too heavy in the warm cafe. He'd tried to look presentable, trimmed his beard, put on a clean shirt, but he still felt out of place among the morning crowd of office workers and college students. The regulars kept stealing glances at him, probably wondering what brought such a rough-looking character to their cozy establishment. The bell above the door chimed for the 10th time, but this time Jack's heart skipped a beat. Emma stood in the doorway, scanning the room. She looked different in daylight, younger, more vulnerable. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore a blue sweater that made her look professional and put together. So different from the rain-soaked woman he'd helped on the roadside. Their eyes met across the room. Jack felt a jolt of recognition. She had his mother's eyes, that same determined set to her jaw. Did she see anything familiar in his face? Did some part of her sense their connection? Emma hesitated for a moment, then walked toward his table. Her steps were measured, cautious. Jack stood up, almost knocking over his cold coffee in the process. He was suddenly aware of how tall he was, how his tattoos peeked out from under his sleeves, how his presence could be intimidating. "Hi," Emma said, her voice soft but steady. "Thanks for meeting me." "Thank you for coming," Jack replied, trying to keep his voice gentle. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit. Can I get you something to drink?" Emma shook her head as she slipped into the chair. "I already ordered at the counter. They'll bring it over." An awkward silence fell between them. Jack watched as Emma arranged and rearranged the sugar packets in their holder, her fingers fidgeting with nervous energy. He wanted to reach out, to tell her everything, but the words stuck in his throat. "So," Emma began, glancing up at him, "I wanted to thank you again for helping me the other night. Not many people would have stopped." Jack nodded, his hands clasped tightly around his coffee cup. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Emma said, meeting his eyes. "They wouldn't have. Most people just drove past." A server appeared with Emma's drink, a vanilla latte, Jack noticed. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup, mirroring his posture. The steam rose between them like a barrier. "I hope it wasn't too forward of me to ask you to meet," Jack said, his voice rougher than he intended. "I just thought—" He trailed off, unsure how to continue without revealing too much too soon. Emma gave him a small, uncertain smile. It was a bit unexpected, but sometimes unexpected things turn out okay. They sat there, father and daughter, separated by secrets and years of absence, each struggling to find the right words to bridge the gap between them. The cafe's ambient noise filled their silences, giving them both time to gather their thoughts and courage for what lay ahead. The tension began to ease as their drinks cooled. Emma wrapped a strand of hair around her finger, a habit that reminded Jack so much of himself. He'd always been fidgety, too. "So, you fix motorcycles?" Emma asked, her curiosity seeming to get the better of her initial hesitation. Jack nodded, feeling more comfortable talking about something familiar. Been doing it most of my life. There's something peaceful about working with your hands, figuring out what makes things tick. I get that, Emma said, brightening. I'm actually studying mechanical engineering. Everyone thinks it's weird that I love taking things apart and putting them back together. Jack couldn't help but smile. Weird? That's not weird at all. When I was your age, I used to drive my mom crazy dismantling everything in sight. Emma laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that made Jack's heart squeeze. Oh my God, my mom was the same way. She'd come home and find the toaster in pieces on the kitchen table. The toaster? Jack chuckled, shaking his head. Amateur. Try explaining why the lawnmower was in parts all over the garage. They both burst out laughing, drawing curious glances from nearby tables. Emma wiped at her eyes, still giggling. Did you ever get it back together? Eventually, only had 3 parts left over. Only 3? That's not bad at all, Emma said with a grin that mirrored his own. Their conversation flowed easier now, jumping from topic to topic. They discovered they both preferred winter to summer, loved old Western movies, and couldn't stand the taste of cilantro. Each shared interest made Jack's chest tighten with a mixture of joy and regret. The morning crowd thinned out, and their second round of drinks arrived. Emma traced the rim of her cup with her finger, her expression growing more serious. Can I ask you something? She said, her voice softer now. Of course. Did you grow up with both your parents? Jack felt his stomach clench. He set his cup down carefully. No, I didn't. My dad wasn't around much. Emma nodded slowly, looking down at her hands. Mine either. She paused, taking a deep breath. Actually, I never knew him at all. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Jack gripped his cup tighter, forcing himself to stay quiet, to listen. Mom doesn't talk about him much, Emma continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I used to make up stories about him when I was little, pretend he was a secret agent or an astronaut, something that would explain why he couldn't be there. Jack's throat felt tight. He watched as Emma blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. Sorry, she said, trying to smile. I don't usually talk about this with people I've just met. It's just... She gestured vaguely. There's always been this empty space, you know? Like a missing puzzle piece. I keep wondering if he ever thinks about me, if he knows I exist, if he... She trailed off, wiping quickly at her eyes. Jack sat there, his heart breaking as he listened to his daughter describe the void he'd left in her life. Every word was a knife twisting in his gut. He wanted to reach across the table to tell her everything, but he remained still, his hands clenched under the table, listening as Emma shared her pain with a man she didn't yet know was its source. Jack shifted in his chair, the leather of his jacket creaking. Emma's pain echoed in his heart, and he knew he needed to share something of himself too. Maybe it would help her understand, when the time came, why some fathers stayed away. I wasn't always, he started, then cleared his throat. The person you see now, it took me a long time to get here. Emma looked up, curiosity replacing some of the sadness in her eyes. Back in my younger days, I ran with the Hells Angels. He watched her eyes widen slightly. Not something I'm proud of now, but back then it felt like family, the only real family I had. The cafe had emptied out now, leaving them in a quiet corner where Jack's low voice carried easily to Emma's ears. We did a lot of things I'm not proud of. Lived rough, made bad choices, the kind that follow you. He rolled up his sleeve, showing a faded tattoo. Each of these marks tells a story, and most of them ain't pretty. Emma leaned forward slightly, her coffee forgotten. What made you leave? Jack rubbed his beard, remembering. Had a close call. Real close. The kind that makes you see your whole life flash before your eyes. He paused. The memory, still vivid. Was in a bad accident. Bike went one way, I went another. Spent 3 months in the hospital. That must have been terrible, Emma said softly. It was, but it was also a blessing. Jack's eyes grew distant. Lying there in that hospital bed, I started thinking about all the people I'd hurt, all the chances I'd missed, the life I could have had if I'd made different choices. He looked down at his weathered hands. Started to realize that the family I thought I had, they weren't really family at all. Emma sat quietly, absorbing his words. The afternoon sun slanted through the cafe windows, casting long shadows across their table. It wasn't easy getting out, Jack continued. Some people, they don't want to let you change, but I knew I had to. Started working honest jobs, fixing bikes legally this time. A small smile crossed his face. Found out I was pretty good at it when I wasn't trying to hide what I was doing. That must have taken a lot of courage, Emma said, her voice thoughtful. Jack shook his head. Not courage. Desperation, maybe. Fear of dying without ever doing anything good with my life. He met her eyes. Sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best changes. Emma sat back, studying him with new eyes. The initial wariness she'd shown toward him had softened into something else. Understanding. Maybe even respect. Thank you, she said suddenly, for telling me all that. Most people, they try to hide their past mistakes. No point in hiding who you were, Jack replied. It's part of who you are now. The important thing is learning from it. Emma nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on her face. The tough exterior she'd first seen, the tattoos, the leather, the gruff manner, now seemed like layers of a much more complex person. Someone who had fought his way back from darkness. Do you ever... She hesitated. Do you ever wish you could go back and do things differently? Jack's heart clenched, thinking of all the years he'd missed with her. Every day, he said quietly. Every single day. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Emma met Jack outside Pete's Diner. The small restaurant's neon sign flickered weakly in the daylight, its weathered facade telling stories of decades gone by. Jack stood by his motorcycle, his familiar leather jacket hanging loose in the warm air. This place doesn't look like much, Jack said, gesturing to the diner, but they make the best apple pie in town. Emma smiled, noting how his gruff exterior seemed softer now. I'm guessing you spent a lot of time here? More than I can count. Jack held the door open, and a little bell chimed above them. Especially after the accident. Pete, the owner, he never judged me, just kept the coffee coming. Inside, the diner was a snapshot of small-town America. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, and chrome stools gleamed at the counter. An elderly waitress nodded at Jack with recognition. Your usual booth is open, Jack, she called out, already reaching for coffee cups. They slid into a worn booth by the window. Emma noticed how Jack seemed to relax here, his broad shoulders losing their usual tension. I used to sit here for hours, Jack said, running his hand along the table's edge. Trying to figure out what to do with my life after leaving the Angels. Pete would refill my coffee and say, "Take your time, son. Answers come when they're ready." Over the next few days, their meetings became a comfortable routine. One afternoon, they walked through the town park, fallen leaves crunching beneath their feet. Jack pointed out the garage where he now worked, explaining how he'd built his reputation as an honest mechanic. It wasn't easy at first, he admitted. People remembered who I was. But slowly, they started to see who I'd become instead. Emma found herself looking forward to their talks. There was something about Jack's presence that felt right. He listened when she spoke about her dreams of opening her own photography studio. His eyes lit up when she showed him some of her work on her phone. "You've got an eye for beauty," he'd said, studying a sunset photo she'd taken, finding it in places most people wouldn't look. They visited the local motorcycle shop where Jack sometimes helped out. Emma watched in fascination as his large hands, surprisingly gentle, demonstrated how to adjust a carburetor. She noticed how the other mechanics treated him with respect, not fear. At the old railroad bridge outside town, they sat on a bench overlooking the river. Jack shared stories about his transformation, the small steps, the setbacks, the victories. Emma found herself sharing too, her fears, her hopes, the empty space she'd always felt growing up without a father. With each passing day, Emma felt the wall she'd built around her heart beginning to crack. Jack's honesty about his past, his quiet strength, and his genuine interest in her life touched something deep inside her. She caught herself wondering what it would be like to have him as a father. But these thoughts also scared her. The connection growing between them felt both natural and terrifying. She didn't know how to handle these feelings. The warmth that spread through her chest when he proudly showed off her photos to Pete at the diner, or the way her heart lifted when he remembered how she liked her coffee. One evening, as they walked back from the diner, Emma realized she'd started thinking of Jack as more than just a friend. He was becoming the father figure she'd always yearned for, but she kept this revelation to herself, uncertain how to navigate these new emotional waters. Emma sat cross-legged on her bed, flipping through old photo albums. Each empty space where a father should have been felt like a reminder of what she'd missed. Birthday parties with just her mom. School plays where she'd scan the audience, hoping to see someone who wasn't there. Graduation day, when she'd pretended not to notice the empty chair beside her mother. She traced her finger over a photo of herself at age 6, missing her front teeth and holding up a science fair ribbon. Her chest tightened as she remembered that day. How proud she'd been of her project about butterflies, and how she'd wished she had someone else to show it to besides her mom. "It's not fair," she whispered, closing the album with trembling hands. Jack seemed so different now, kind, thoughtful, trying his best to make up for lost time. But 22 years of absence weighed heavy on her heart. Emma grabbed her keys and drove to her mother's house, needing answers that only Sarah could provide. The familiar 2-story home with its white picket fence and overflowing flower boxes had always been her safe haven. Sarah was in the kitchen baking cookies, the scent of vanilla and chocolate filling the air. She took one look at Emma's face and knew something was wrong. "Sweetheart, what is it?" "Mom," Emma's voice cracked as she sank into a kitchen chair. "I've been spending time with Jack." Sarah's hands stilled over the cookie dough. She wiped them on her apron and sat down across from Emma. "I know. He called me last week. He's not what I expected." Emma twisted a paper napkin in her hands. "He's kind and honest about his past. He listens when I talk about photography. He remembers how I like my coffee." Her voice broke. "But where was he all those years? Why didn't he try to find me?" Sarah reached across the table and took Emma's hands in hers. "Oh, honey, it's complicated." "Then help me understand," Emma pleaded, "because I'm starting to care about him and it scares me." Sarah took a deep breath. "When I met Jack, he was deep in the motorcycle club. It wasn't just about riding bikes. There were dangerous people, illegal activities. I loved him, but I was terrified of that world." She squeezed Emma's hands. "When I found out I was pregnant, with you, I had to make a choice. You kept him away? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. I did. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I told him I never wanted to see him again. I changed my number, moved across town. I was so scared that his lifestyle would put you in danger. The club he was with. They weren't good people, Emma. There were raids, arrests, violence. Emma sat in stunned silence as her mother continued. I thought I was protecting you, Sarah said softly. But watching you grow up wondering about him, sometimes I questioned if I'd made the right choice. The man he is now, he's not the same person he was back then. He's worked hard to change his life. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I wanted you to make your own decision about him when you were old enough. I didn't want my fears to color your judgment. Sarah wiped a tear from her cheek. But maybe I was wrong to keep him away completely. Maybe there could have been a middle ground. Emma stared, down at their joined hands, her mind wrestling with this new information. Her mother had acted out of love and fear, trying to shield her from a dangerous world. But the cost had been years of wondering, of feeling incomplete. Jack stood in his kitchen, washing dishes from breakfast when 3 sharp knocks rattled his front door. The sound was too aggressive for a casual visitor. His shoulders tensed as he dried his hands on a dish towel, years of instinct kicking in. Through the window beside his door, he saw a familiar face that made his stomach drop. Mickey hadn't changed much. Same weather-beaten face, same cold eyes, same leather vest with patches that spoke of a life Jack had left behind. Jack opened the door but stayed in the doorframe, blocking the entrance. Mickey. Well, well, big Jack Lawson. Mickey's grin didn't reach his eyes. Living the quiet life, I see. Nice little house you got here. What do you want? Jack kept his voice steady, though his heart hammered, against his ribs. Mickey leaned against the porch railing, casual as could be. Can't a guy check up on an old friend? Been hearing things about you, Jackie boy. Hearing you've gone soft. I'm done with that life. You know that. Nobody's ever really done. Mickey's smile faded. Look, we need your help with something. Just one job, for old time's sake. Jack's jaw clenched. No. Come on, Jack. You were the best mechanic we had. We got a situation that needs your special touch. Mickey pulled out a cigarette, lit it. Good money in it for you. I said no. Jack's voice dropped lower, dangerous. I've built something here. Something clean. Mickey's face hardened. Clean? Is that what you call running away? Abandoning your brothers? Those weren't brothers. That was a prison with patches. Jack stepped forward, using his height to loom over Mickey. I suggest you leave. You got comfortable, Jack. Mickey blew smoke in Jack's direction. Maybe too comfortable. Be a shame if something happened to upset that. Before Jack could respond, he heard footsteps on the walkway. His heart nearly stopped when he saw Emma approaching, a coffee cup in each hand. She slowed as she noticed Mickey, confusion crossing her face. Jack? She called out uncertainly. Mickey's eyebrows rose as he looked between them. Well now, who's this pretty thing? Nobody you need to concern yourself with, Jack said quickly. Emma, why don't you come back later? Emma hesitated, her eyes taking in Mickey's patches, the tension in Jack's stance. I brought coffee, she said weakly, holding up the cups. Ain't you going to introduce us, Jack? Mickey's smile was all teeth now. Where are your manners? Jack moved to put himself between Mickey and Emma. Mickey was just leaving. Sure, sure. Mickey dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his boot. Think about what I said, Jackie boy. Clock's ticking. He gave Emma another long look before sauntering down the steps and toward a motorcycle parked on the street. Emma waited until Mickey had roared away before speaking. Who was that? Just someone I used to know. Jack tried to keep his voice light, but he could see the questions in Emma's eyes. From the old days. He didn't seem very friendly. Emma handed him one of the coffees, her hands slightly shaky. It's nothing to worry about. Jack attempted a smile, but it felt forced. Ancient history. Emma took a step back, clutching her coffee cup like a shield. Are you sure? Because it didn't look like ancient history to me. Jack saw the doubt creeping into her expression, the way she held herself just a little more distant. All the trust they'd built over the past weeks seemed to waver in the air between them. Emma, he started, but she cut him off. Maybe I should go, she said quietly, backing away another step. I need some time to think. Emma's phone display showed Jack for the 5th time that morning. She paced her small apartment, watching it, ring until it went to voicemail again. Outside, rain tapped against her windows, matching her gloomy mood. Jack, it's me again, she said after the beep. Please call me back. I need to understand what happened yesterday. She paused, gripping the phone tighter. Who was that man? Why did you look so scared? She ended the call and sank into her couch, pulling her knees to her chest. The scene from yesterday played over in her mind. Mickey's menacing smile, Jack's rigid posture, the thick tension in the air. Everything about that moment had felt dangerous. Her mother's warnings echoed in her head. Your father lived a complicated life, Sarah had told her. He ran with dangerous people. Emma had thought those days were long gone, but Mickey's visit suggested otherwise. She tried calling once more, drumming her fingers against her thigh as it rang. Come on, Jack, she whispered. Pick up. Nothing. Around midday, she sent a text. I'm worried. Please talk to me. The response came hours later. I'm okay, just need some time. Emma stared at those words, frustration building in her chest. After weeks of building trust, of sharing stories and learning to be comfortable with each other, it felt like they were suddenly back at square one. She typed back, That's not good enough. I deserve answers. Minutes ticked by without a response. Emma busied herself with household chores, trying to keep her mind off the situation. She was loading her dishwasher when her phone finally rang. Her heart jumped when she saw Jack's name. She answered immediately. Hello? Emma? Jack's voice sounded tired. I'm sorry for not calling back sooner. Who was he, Jack? Emma didn't bother with pleasantries. That man, Mickey. What did he want? There was a long pause. He's someone from my past, from when I was with the Angels. And? Emma pressed. What did he want from you? It's complicated, Jack said, his voice guarded. Some old business that doesn't matter anymore. Doesn't matter? Emma's voice rose slightly. He threatened you. I heard him. Emma, please. Jack sighed heavily. There are some things about my past that... It's better if you don't know all the details. That's not fair. Emma felt tears pricking at her eyes. I've been honest with you about everything. I've opened up about how much it hurt growing up without you. And now you won't even tell me the truth? I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. The words burst out of her. I need honesty. I need to know if I can trust you. The silence that followed felt endless. I understand, Jack finally said, his voice rough with emotion. But there are parts of my past that I'm not proud of. Things I've done that I can't take back. Emma wiped at her eyes. I need time, she said quietly. Time to think about all this. About us. Emma. No, she cut him off. I thought we were building something real here, but how can we do that if you won't be honest with me? Jack's breath was shaky on the other end. "I don't want to lose you." "Then give me time," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I need to figure out if I can handle this, whatever this is." Emma sat at her desk in the small insurance office where she worked, staring blankly at her computer screen. Numbers and client information blurred together as her mind wandered to Jack. 3 days had passed since their phone call, and the silence between them felt like a heavy weight on her chest. "Earth to Emma." Sarah, her co-worker, waved a hand in front of her face. "That's the 3rd time I've called your name." Emma blinked, forcing a smile. "Sorry, just lost in thought." "Boy troubles?" Sarah perched on the edge of Emma's desk. "Something like that." Emma shuffled some papers, avoiding eye contact. How could she explain that she'd finally found her father, only to discover his past might be too complicated to handle? "Well, we're going out tonight," Sarah declared. "No arguments. You need to get out of your head." That evening, Emma found herself at their usual hangout, the corner bar. Music played softly in the background as her friends chatted around her. She stirred her soda with a straw, trying to focus on their conversation about weekend plans and office gossip. "You're doing it again," Sarah nudged her. "Spacing out." Emma sighed. "I know, I'm sorry." "Want to talk about it?" Emma wrapped her arms around herself. "Have you ever wanted something so badly, but when you got it, it wasn't what you expected?" "Like that time I dated the hot gym trainer who turned out to be living with his mom at 40? Sarah joked. Despite herself, Emma laughed. "Not exactly." She traced a pattern in the condensation on her glass. "It's more like finding out something you've always dreamed about comes with complications you're not sure you're ready for." Back at her apartment later that night, Emma pulled out the small photo album she kept of her childhood. Each page showed moments with her mom, school events, birthday parties. But there was always something missing, an empty space where a father should have been. She touched a photo of herself at her high school graduation. She'd searched the crowd that day, hoping somehow her father would be there. Now that she'd found him, why did it feel so hard? Her phone sat on the coffee table, silent. No messages from Jack. Part of her wanted to reach out, to try and understand more about his past. But another part was scared of what she might learn. Across town, Jack paced his living room, pausing occasionally to stare at his phone. Emma's contact information glowed on the screen, but he couldn't bring himself to press call. He grabbed his leather jacket from the hook by the door, then put it back. He'd done this dance 12 times today, almost leaving to go see her, then stopping himself. "Give her space," he muttered, running a hand through his graying beard. His eyes landed on the few photos he had displayed. Most were from his younger days, wild times with the angels that he'd rather forget. But there, tucked in the corner of one frame, was a small photo booth strip from last week. 4 shots of him and Emma, making silly faces, laughing, looking like a real father and daughter. Jack's fist clenched. Mickey's visit had ruined everything. Just when he'd started to feel like maybe he could be the father Emma deserved, his past had come crashing back. He walked through his house, touching things absently. The coffee mug Emma had used last week, the chair where she'd sat telling him about her job, her dreams. The space felt emptier now, the silence more pronounced. His phone buzzed, and his heart leaped. But it was just a spam call. Jack tossed it onto his couch in frustration. The urge to reach out to Emma, to explain everything, was overwhelming. But he remembered her words. "I need time." Jack stood in his garage, surrounded by remnants of his old life. Motorcycle parts, worn, leather jackets, and boxes filled with memories from his days with the angels cluttered the space. Sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up an old photo album. Inside, yellowed photographs showed younger versions of himself with Mickey and other club members. They were grinning, arms thrown around each other's shoulders, their faces full of defiance and misplaced pride. "Time to let go," he muttered, dropping the album into a large cardboard box. One by one, Jack sorted through the items. Some went into boxes marked "Donate," others into garbage bags. Each object carried a weight of memories, some good, many bad. A leather vest, patches still proudly displayed, reminded him of nights he'd rather forget. Into the box it went. His phone buzzed. Mickey's name flashed on the screen. Jack stared at it for a long moment, then declined the call. Seconds later, a text message appeared. "Come on, brother. Don't be like that. We need to talk." Jack's jaw clenched. He typed back a simple message. "We're done. Don't contact me again." He blocked Mickey's number, feeling a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Mickey wouldn't take this well, but Jack knew it was necessary. Emma was worth more than any loyalty he might have felt to his old life. As he worked, sweat beading on his forehead, Jack remembered Emma's face when she'd seen Mickey at his house. The fear in her eyes, the way she'd pulled back. It had hurt more than any punch he'd ever taken. The cleaning continued for hours. Jack found old rally tickets, faded photographs, even a rusted chain that brought back memories of fights he'd rather forget. Each item went into boxes or bags, his past being sorted and packed away. By late afternoon, his garage looked different. Cleaner. Lighter. The space felt like it could breathe again. Jack sat on his workbench, surveying the transformation. The physical act of clearing out his past had left him feeling oddly peaceful. He picked up his phone again, this time scrolling to Emma's number. His thumb hovered over it for a moment before he pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before going to voicemail. "Emma," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know you need time, and I respect that. But I want you to know I'm making changes. Real ones. I'm done with the past, all of it." He paused, taking a deep breath. "There's this place I used to go up at Cedar Point. It's quiet there, peaceful. Would you meet me there tomorrow? Just to talk. I want to show you something." He ended the call and looked around his garage one more time. The space that had once been filled with reminders of his old life now held possibility. Maybe, just maybe, he could fill it with new memories. Better ones. With Emma. A text notification buzzed. His heart jumped, thinking it might be Emma, but it was Mickey again, this time from a different number. "You can't just walk away." Jack deleted the message without responding. He'd made his choice. His past might try to hold on, but he was choosing his future. He was choosing Emma. Cedar Point wasn't what Emma had expected. Instead of the bustling tourist spot she knew, Jack had led her to a quiet overlook above the town. Ancient oak trees provided shade from the afternoon sun, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. Below them, the small town sprawled out like a patchwork quilt. Emma stood a few feet away from Jack, arms crossed. The tension between them felt like a physical barrier. Jack leaned against the wooden railing, his large frame somehow looking smaller, more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. "I used to come here when things got rough," Jack said, breaking the silence. "Something about being above it all helps put things in perspective." His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Emma moved closer to the railing but maintained her distance. "Why did you bring me here?" Jack ran a hand through, his graying beard. "Because this is where I made some of my biggest decisions, including the one to leave the Angels." He turned to face her. "And yesterday, I made another big choice here." "What choice?" Emma asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. "To let go of everything that could hurt you. I've spent the last day clearing out my garage, getting rid of everything from my old life." His eyes met hers. "I blocked Mickey's number, cut ties with everyone from back then." Emma's arms loosened slightly. "Just like that?" "Just like that." Jack's voice cracked. "Because nothing from that life matters as much as having a chance to be your father." The honesty in his voice made Emma's throat tight. She moved closer, finally leaning against the railing beside him. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not just of your past, but of letting you in, of trusting you." Jack nodded slowly. "I understand that. I'm scared too." He looked out over the town. "Scared I'll mess this up. Scared I don't deserve a second chance. But I'm more scared of losing you again." Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I've spent so many years wondering about you, making up stories about why you weren't there, and now that you are—" She wiped at her eyes. "It's overwhelming." "I know." Jack's voice was thick with emotion. "If I could go back and change things, I would, but I can't. All I can do is try to be better now." They stood in silence for a moment, watching a flock of birds wheel across the sky. The tension between them had shifted, becoming something softer, more manageable. "Yesterday," Emma said quietly, "when I saw that man at your house, I saw the person you used to be. But right now—" She turned to look at him. "I see someone different." Jack's eyes were red-rimmed. "I am different. That life, those choices, they taught me exactly who I don't want to be anymore." He straightened up, facing her fully. "I want to be someone you can be proud of, Emma. Someone worthy of being your father." The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep inside Emma. She saw past his tough exterior, past the tattoos and the gruff demeanor, to the man who had helped her on that rainy night, the man who was trying so hard to make things right. "I can't promise it will be easy," she said softly, "but I want to try." The relief on Jack's face was profound, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. They both turned back to the view, standing closer now, the space between them no longer feeling like a chasm. The engine made a horrible grinding sound before dying completely. Emma's heart sank as she guided her car to the curb, the steering wheel fighting her until the last moment. The streetlight above flickered, casting uncertain shadows across the empty street. This wasn't the nice part of town. Graffiti covered the walls of abandoned buildings, and broken glass glittered on the sidewalk like deadly diamonds. The only open business was a run-down liquor store across the street, its neon sign buzzing and sputtering in the growing darkness. Emma's hands shook as she tried to restart the car. Nothing. Not even a click. She grabbed her phone, but her heart dropped when she saw there was only 5% battery left. She quickly dialed Jack's number, praying he would pick up. Come on," she whispered as the phone rang. The sound of approaching motorcycles made her sink lower in her seat. A group of leather-clad riders cruised past, their bikes rumbling like angry thunder. Jack's voicemail picked up. Emma tried to keep her voice steady. "Dad, I'm stuck on Marshall Street near Pete's Liquor. My car won't start and my phone's about to die. Please!" The phone went black. Dead. The motorcycle gang had turned around. They were coming back. Emma's throat went dry as she watched them pull up alongside her car in her rearview mirror. 5 men, all wearing patches she didn't recognize. One of them, a tall man with a snake tattoo on his neck, tapped on her window. "Need some help, sweetheart?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. Emma locked her doors, her heart pounding. The man's smile faded. He tried the handle, then knocked harder on the window. "Don't be like that. We're just trying to help." Across town, Jack was working in his garage when he checked his phone. One missed call from Emma. His stomach clenched as he listened to her message. Marshall Street. That was Mickey's territory. Jack's bike roared to life as he gunned it out of his driveway. He knew exactly what kind of help Mickey's crew offered to stranded motorists. The thought of Emma being anywhere near them made his blood run cold. The streets blurred past as Jack pushed his motorcycle to its limits. Every red light felt like torture. Every stop sign was an eternity. Finally, he turned onto Marshall Street and saw them, 5 bikes surrounding Emma's car. Snakeneck was still tapping on Emma's window, but now he held something metallic in his hand. The others were laughing, circling the car like vultures. Jack's motorcycle announced his arrival with a thunderous roar. He pulled up hard, gravel spraying. The laughter died instantly. Well, Snakeneck straightened up. "If it isn't Big Jack himself, come to join the party? Step away from the car." Jack's voice was low, dangerous. He dismounted, his imposing frame towering over most of them. "Since when do you care about some random girl?" Snakeneck sneered, but Jack could see uncertainty in his eyes. "That's my daughter." Jack moved forward, placing himself between Emma's car and the gang. "And if any of you so much as breathe on her car again, you'll wish you'd never heard the name Big Jack Lawson." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Snakeneck's hand tightened on his tool, but Jack didn't flinch. He stood there, solid as a mountain, ready to protect Emma at any cost. Through the windshield, Emma watched the scene unfold. She'd never seen Jack like this. Both frightening and reassuring at the same time. For the first time, she truly understood how far he'd come from his past life, and what he was willing to do to keep her safe. Snakeneck made the first move. He lunged forward with his makeshift weapon, a rusted tire iron that glinted in the dim streetlight. Jack moved with surprising speed for a man his size, catching the weapon mid-swing. In one fluid motion, he twisted it from Snakeneck's grip and tossed it aside. "Last warning," Jack growled. His voice carried the weight of years of confrontations just like this one. 2 more gang members circled behind him. Emma watched through the windshield, her heart pounding as she saw Jack's shoulders tense. He was outnumbered, but something in his stance told her this wasn't his first time facing such odds. The fight erupted in a blur of motion. Snakeneck threw a wild punch that Jack deflected easily. Another attacker grabbed Jack from behind, but Jack used the man's momentum against him, throwing him off balance. The third man caught a solid right hook to the jaw that sent him sprawling. Emma had never seen violence like this up close. Jack moved with practiced efficiency, each movement calculated and precise. This wasn't just about strength. This was experience earned the hard way, on streets just like these. "You forgot who I am," Jack said, his breath barely labored as he stood over Snakeneck. "You forgot what the name Lawson means in these parts." The remaining gang members helped Snakeneck to his feet. They backed away slowly, their bravado replaced by genuine fear. They knew they'd made a mistake crossing Big Jack Lawson. "We didn't know she was yours, Jack," Snakeneck mumbled, holding his bruised jaw. "We wouldn't have—" "Get out of here," Jack cut him off, "and spread the word. Emma's off limits. Anyone touches her, they answer to me." The gang members scrambled onto their bikes and roared off into the night, leaving only the echo of their engines and the heavy silence that followed. Jack stood there for a moment, his fists still clenched, watching until they disappeared. Then his shoulders slumped, and he turned to Emma's car. She unlocked the doors with trembling hands. Jack slid into the passenger seat. Neither spoke for a long moment. The only sound was their breathing and the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the city. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Jack finally said. His voice was different now, softer, heavy with regret. "That's the world I used to live in, the world I tried to leave behind." Emma looked at her father's hands, hands that had just fought so fiercely to protect her, now resting quietly in his lap. "Tell me everything," she said. "No more secrets." Jack took a deep breath. "I was different back then. Angry. Dangerous. The Hells Angels became my family because I didn't know how to have a real one." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I did things I'm not proud of, things that kept me awake at night, but meeting your mother, that was the first time I saw a different path. Why didn't you stay?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "Because I wasn't ready to be the man she needed me to be, the father you deserved." Jack turned to face her fully. "I couldn't drag you both into this life, so I left, thinking I was protecting you. It took me years to realize that running away wasn't protection, it was cowardice." The streetlights cast long shadows across Emma's face as she drove home, her mind replaying the night's events like a movie she couldn't pause. Jack's words echoed in her thoughts, mixing with the images of his fight with the gang members. The man who had protected her tonight was both familiar and strange. The gentle soul who fixed her car that rainy night, and the hardened fighter who could take down 3 men without breaking a sweat. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. The same hands that had helped her change a tire last week had just laid out 3 men in a parking lot. How could someone be both things at once? The contradiction made her head spin. Emma pulled into her apartment complex, but didn't get out right away. Instead, she sat in her car, letting the engine idle as her thoughts churned. Jack had been honest tonight, maybe more honest than he'd ever been. She could still see the pain in his eyes when he talked about his past, the regret that seemed to weigh down his broad shoulders. "The father you deserved," he'd said. Those words stuck with her. All these years, she'd imagined her father as someone who simply didn't care enough to stay. But Jack's version was different. A man too broken to trust himself with a family, too scared of his own darkness to risk sharing it with them. Emma finally turned off the engine and walked to her apartment. Inside, she kicked off her shoes and sank into her favorite armchair, the one that faced the window. The city lights twinkled beyond the glass, steady and unchanging, unlike everything else in her life right now. She pulled out her phone and looked at the recent photos. Snapshots of her and Jack at the diner, him teaching her about motorcycle engines, both of them laughing over some shared joke. In every picture, his eyes held a warmth that seemed at odds with the man she'd seen tonight. But maybe that was the point. People could change, couldn't they? The memory of Jack standing between her and danger surfaced again. He hadn't hesitated, hadn't shown an ounce of fear. He'd protected her with everything he had. Wasn't that what fathers were supposed to do? But the violence? Emma shuddered. Those efficient movements, the way he'd handled himself, that came from years of similar confrontations. How many fights had he been in? How many people had he hurt? The questions piled up like storm clouds in her mind. She made herself a cup of tea, watching the steam rise in lazy spirals. Jack had said he was different now, and his actions over the past weeks seemed to support that. He'd been patient, kind, willing to answer her questions. He'd shown up every time she needed him, even tonight when she was stranded in a dangerous part of town. The tea warmed her hands as she curled up on her couch. Outside, a car alarm went off briefly before falling silent. Emma thought about second chances, about redemption. Her mother had always told her that people could change if they really wanted to, if they were willing to put in the work. And Jack had put in the work, hadn't he? 20 years of staying clean, building a new life, trying to be better. Tonight hadn't been about violence. It had been about protection. About finally being the father he'd never had the chance to be before. Emma closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the tea seep into her bones. The past couldn't be changed. Jack's history would always be there, like a shadow behind him. But maybe what mattered more was the man he was trying to be now, the father he was fighting to become. The Sheol morning sun filtered through Emma's apartment windows, casting warm patches of light across her living room floor. A gentle knock at the door made her heart skip. She knew who it was. She'd recognize that steady, firm knock anywhere. Jack stood in the hallway, his large frame somehow looking smaller today. His eyes were tired, like he hadn't slept much either. He wore a clean flannel shirt and jeans, a far cry from his leather jacket of the night before. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, stepping aside. Jack entered slowly, his movements careful, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace of the morning. He settled into an armchair while Emma perched on the edge of her couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I couldn't sleep last night," Jack began, his voice rough with emotion. "Kept thinking about everything, about what you saw, what you must think of me now." He ran a hand through his graying hair, a gesture Emma had come to recognize as a sign of his nervousness. "Those men," Emma started, but Jack held up his hand. "Let me say this first, please." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "What you saw last night, that was a part of my life I thought I'd left behind. I never wanted you to see that side of me. Never wanted you to know how violent I could be." Sunlight caught the silver in his beard as he spoke. "I'm sorry, Emma. Sorry for everything. For not being there when you were growing up. For letting you see that ugliness last night. But mostly, I'm sorry for all the years we lost." Emma watched a tear roll down his weathered cheek. It was strange seeing such vulnerability from someone so physically imposing. "I want you to know something," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "I've spent 20 years building a different life, 20 years trying to become someone worthy of having a family, and I promise you, right here and now, that nothing from my past will ever hurt you. I won't let it." He pulled something from his pocket, a small, worn photo. "Your mother sent me this years ago. I've carried it every day since." He held it out to Emma. It showed her as a toddler, all pigtails and missing teeth, grinning at the camera. "I looked at this picture whenever I felt weak, whenever I thought about going back to my old life. It reminded me why I had to stay strong, even though I couldn't be with you." His voice cracked. "I may not have been there then, but I'm here now, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you're safe and happy, if you'll let me." Emma's vision blurred with tears as she stared at the photo. Her throat felt tight with emotion. Here was the truth of their connection, not in shared DNA or lost years, but in this moment of raw honesty between them. "I was so scared last night," she whispered. "Not of those men, but of losing this, losing you, just when I'd found you." Jack's eyes met hers, filled with understanding and hope. Emma felt something shift inside her, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. Their relationship wasn't perfect. It was complicated and messy and marked by years of absence, but it was real. It was theirs. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she realized that despite everything, despite the fear and uncertainty, she wanted this connection. Wanted to know this man who had fought so hard to change, who had carried her picture for 20 years, who had finally found his way back to her. The small diner buzzed with the afternoon crowd as Emma followed Jack through the door. A bell chimed overhead, and immediately several faces lit up at Jack's entrance. "Big Jack," called out an elderly woman from behind the counter. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her warm smile created a web of wrinkles around her eyes. "And this must be Emma." "Martha," Jack said, his voice full of affection. "This is my daughter." Emma felt a flutter in her chest at those words, "my daughter." They still felt new, but somehow right. "Been waiting years to meet you, sweetheart," Martha said, coming around the counter to give Emma a surprisingly strong hug. "Your father's been coming here every Sunday for the past 15 years, helped me fix this place up when times were tough." As they settled into a booth, Martha brought over 2 steaming mugs of coffee without being asked. "Just how you like it, Jack. And Emma, honey, you let me know if you need cream or sugar." Throughout the afternoon, Emma met more of the people who had been part of Jack's journey. There was Pete, the local mechanic who'd given Jack his first honest job after leaving his old life behind. Sarah, a counselor who'd helped him work through his demons. And Tom, a retired pastor who'd become Jack's mentor and friend. Each person had a story about Jack. Not about his past, but about the man he'd become. How he'd helped Martha repair her roof during a storm. The times he'd stayed late at Pete's garage to help with difficult repairs. The way he volunteered at Tom's youth center, teaching kids basic car maintenance to keep them off the streets. Later, they walked through the park, where Jack often came to think. The autumn air was crisp, and fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet. "These people," Emma said, breaking a comfortable silence. "They really care about you." Jack nodded, his hands in his pockets. "They saw something in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Gave me a chance when most people wouldn't." They made their way to Jack's house, a modest place he'd fixed up himself. Inside, Emma noticed new details she hadn't seen before. Photographs of the people they'd met today, books on meditation and self-improvement, a guitar in the corner. "You play?" she asked, gesturing to the instrument. Jack chuckled, settling into his favorite armchair. "Trying to learn. Martha's grandson's been teaching me. I'm terrible, but it keeps my hands busy when my mind gets restless." Emma sat on the couch, tucking her legs under her. "Will you play something?" Jack's ears turned red. "You'll regret asking." But he picked up the guitar anyway, positioning it carefully. His large fingers moved awkwardly over the strings as he played a simple tune, missing several notes and grimacing at each mistake. Emma couldn't help but laugh, not at his playing, but at the expression of intense concentration on his face. Jack looked up, pretending to be offended, but soon joined in her laughter. Okay, he said, setting the guitar aside. "I warned you." The warmth of their shared laughter filled the room. Emma looked around at the home Jack had built for himself, not just the physical space, but the life he'd created, the friends who'd become family, the small ways he'd found to make a difference. For the first time since discovering who Jack was, Emma felt truly at peace. This wasn't just the story of a man with a troubled past. It was the story of someone who'd fought hard to become better, who'd built something meaningful from the ashes of his old life. The autumn days grew shorter, but Emma and Jack's time together seemed to stretch longer with each passing week. They fell into an easy routine, meeting for coffee on Tuesday mornings before Emma headed to work, and spending Sunday afternoons at Martha's diner. One crisp morning, Emma arrived early at Jack's house. She found him in the garage, bent over the engine of an old Chevrolet. "Need a hand?" she asked, setting down 2 coffee cups on his workbench. Jack looked up, a streak of grease on his forehead. "You know anything about cars?" "Mom made sure I knew the basics," Emma said, rolling up her sleeves. "Said a woman should never be helpless with a vehicle." Jack's eyes softened at the mention of Sarah. "Your mother's a smart woman." He handed Emma a wrench. "Want to learn something new?" For the next hour, Jack taught Emma about timing belts and spark plugs. His large hands, usually so intimidating, moved with surprising gentleness around the delicate engine parts. Emma watched, asking questions, and found herself relaxing into the comfortable silence between explanations. "You know," she said, wiping her hands on a rag, "I used to imagine what you'd be like. When I was little, I mean." Jack paused, giving her his full attention. These moments of openness had become more frequent between them, but they still felt precious. "I thought you'd be some kind of superhero," she continued with a small laugh. "Then when I got older, I imagined you as this mysterious businessman who traveled the world. Never thought you'd be teaching me about cars in a garage." "Disappointed?" Jack asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. Emma shook her head. "No, this is better." They started spending more time at Jack's house. Emma would bring over takeout, and they'd sit in his living room sharing stories. Jack told her about his childhood, about the mistakes that led him to the Hells Angels, and about the moment he decided to change his life. Emma shared her own struggles, the feeling of being different in school, the questions about her father, the way she'd learned to be strong on her own. One evening, as they sat on Jack's porch watching the sunset, Emma noticed how comfortable the silence between them had become. There was no more awkwardness, no more careful dancing around difficult topics. Jack was just Dad. The thought struck her suddenly, and she realized it felt right. Back at her apartment that night, Emma picked up her phone. Her thumb hovered over her mother's number for a moment before pressing dial. "Mom?" she said when Sarah answered. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course, sweetheart. Everything okay?" Emma curled up in her favorite reading chair, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. "Yeah, everything's good. Really good, actually. I wanted to talk to you about Dad." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Jack?" "We've been spending a lot of time together," Emma said. "And I know it wasn't easy for you, keeping him away to protect me. But Mom, he's really changed. He's shown me who he is now, and he's let me decide for myself whether to accept him." She heard her mother's soft intake of breath. "And have you? Accepted him?" "I have," Emma said, surprised by how steady her voice was. "He's not perfect, but he's trying so hard, and I think I'm ready to have him in my life. Really have him in my life. As my dad." The morning sun cast long shadows across Jack's driveway as he worked on Emma's car, performing a routine oil change. The peaceful silence was broken by the rumble of approaching motorcycles. Jack's shoulders tensed as he recognized the familiar sound of custom Harleys. 3 bikes pulled up, their riders wearing the familiar leather jackets adorned with patches that had once been such a significant part of his life. At the lead was Danny the Snake Morrison, a man Jack hadn't seen in 5 years. "Well, well," Danny called out, dismounting his bike. "If it isn't Big Jack himself." His voice carried a false warmth that made Jack's skin crawl. Jack wiped his hands on a shop rag, straightening to his full height. "Danny, been a long time." "Too long, brother." Danny's eyes darted around the neat garage, taking in the organized tools and family photos on the wall. "Nice setup you got here. Real domestic." Jack remained silent, watching as Danny's companions positioned themselves near the garage entrance. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Got a job coming up?" Danny said, his voice dropping lower. "Big score, like the old days. We could use someone with your expertise." Before Jack could respond, Emma's car pulled up. She'd forgotten her phone and had come back to get it. Jack's heart rate quickened as she stepped out, immediately sensing the charged atmosphere. "Dad?" she called out uncertainly, using the term that had only recently become natural between them. Danny's eyebrows shot up. "Dad? Well, ain't that something?" He turned to Emma with an oily smile. "Sweetheart, would you mind giving us a minute? Just catching up with your old man here?" Jack took a step forward, positioning himself between Emma and the visitors. "She stays. Whatever you've got to say, Danny, say it and go." "Come on, Jack," Danny pressed, his friendly facade cracking slightly. "One last ride, for old time's sake. The money's good, real good, enough to set you and your little family up proper." Emma watched her father, holding her breath. Jack's massive frame seemed to grow even larger as he squared his shoulders. "I made my choice 5 years ago," Jack said, his voice quiet but firm. "Nothing's changed. I'm not that man anymore." Danny's face hardened. "You saying you're too good for us now, getting soft in your old age?" "No," Jack replied evenly. "I'm saying I found something worth being better for." He glanced briefly at Emma, then back to Danny. "You should try it sometime." One of Danny's companions took a menacing step forward, but Danny held up his hand. He studied Jack for a long moment, then shook his head with a bitter laugh. "You always were stubborn as hell, Jack." Danny swung his leg over his bike. "Hope this domestic bliss is worth it." "It is," Jack said simply. The roar of motorcycles filled the air as the 3 riders departed. Jack remained standing at the garage entrance until the sound faded completely. When he finally turned around, he found Emma looking at him with tears in her eyes. "You okay?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, moving closer to wrap her arms around his waist in a tight hug. "That was Danny Morrison, wasn't it? From your old crew?" "Yeah," Jack said, returning the embrace. "But that life's behind me now. Has been for a long time." Emma pulled back to look up at him, her eyes shining with pride. "I know, Dad. I know." They stood there in the morning sun, father and daughter, while the dust settled on the driveway where Jack's past had briefly intruded on his present. The community center buzzed with conversation and laughter. Streamers hung from the ceiling, and tables decorated with simple wildflower centerpieces dotted the room. Jack stood near the entrance, fidgeting with his collar. He'd traded his usual leather jacket for a clean button-down shirt, though he'd drawn the line at removing his favorite boots. Emma appeared beside him, looking radiant in a blue summer dress. "You okay, Dad?" she asked, touching his arm gently. "Just nervous," he admitted. "Been a long time since I've been to anything like this." Sarah, Emma's mother, approached them with a warm smile. Time had softened the edges between her and Jack, their shared love for Emma building bridges where walls once stood. "Everyone's excited to meet you both," she said, gesturing to the gathered friends and family members. Jack took a deep breath and stepped forward, Emma by his side. The room gradually quieted as people noticed them. Some faces showed curiosity, others warmth, and a few, the ones who remembered the old Jack, showed surprise at his transformation. "I want to thank everyone for coming," Jack began, his deep voice carrying across the room. "Most of you know parts of our story, but today—" He paused, looking at Emma with pride shining in his eyes. "Today, I get to properly introduce my daughter, Emma." Emma squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his presence. The crowd responded with applause and welcoming smiles. Sarah's sister, Julie, rushed forward to hug Emma, exclaiming how she could see Jack's features in her face. Emma's cousin Mark, who'd known about Jack only through old family stories, approached to shake his hand. As the afternoon progressed, Jack found himself sharing stories with Emma's extended family. He told them about the night they first met, when her car broke down in the rain. Emma jumped in to add her perspective, making everyone laugh with her impression of how intimidating Jack had looked that night. The gathering moved outdoors as the sun began to set. Paper lanterns cast a warm glow over the patio, where Jack and Emma found a quiet moment together. They sat on a wooden bench, watching their family mingle and chat. "You know," Emma said, breaking their comfortable silence, "I used to dream about moments like this, having my whole family together, knowing where I came from." She turned to look at Jack. "But the reality is so much better than anything I imagined." Jack's weathered face softened. "I spent years thinking I didn't deserve this kind of happiness," he admitted. "Thought my past had cost me any chance at being a father." "But look at us now," Emma said, gesturing to the gathering. "We found each other. We made it work." "We did," Jack agreed, his voice thick with emotion. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped package. "I've been waiting for the right moment to give you this." Emma carefully unwrapped it to reveal a silver compass, old but well-maintained. "It was my father's," Jack explained. "He gave it to me when I was young, told me it would help me find my way home if I ever got lost. Seems fitting now." Emma traced the intricate engravings with her finger, tears welling in her eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered, leaning against his shoulder. They sat together, watching the lanterns sway in the evening breeze, their hearts full with the knowledge that after all the years of searching, they'd finally found their way home in each other. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.